Hola, bonjour. Hello. All right, let's get started with today's lesson. So I'm going to pull up our lesson for this week, and let's take a look at first digraphs. So a digraph, and you'll see that word digraph right here. A digraph is when we have two consonants that are next to each other in a word, and they only make one sound. So they team up and they make one sound. An example that we're going to use for this week is S and H. When S and H are next to each other in a word, they make the sh sound like shovel. Go ahead and make that sh sound. Awesome. All right, let's look at some words that use the sh sound. Here we go. Sh, a, p, shop. Sh, e, d, shed. Sh, I, n, shin. F, I, sh, fish. A, sh, rush. W, I, sh, wish. Sh, I, p, ship. K, a, sh, crush. K, a, sh, crash. Awesome. Now I'm going to make the sounds and I'm not going to give you the words. I want you to say the words. Sh, a, m, d, I, sh. Sh, I, m, d, a, sh. Sh, a, t, shut. Oh, I gave you that one to you. L, a, sh. All right, now I want you to try saying these words on your own. So first make the sounds. Good, that word is mash. Good, that word is lash. And one more, here we go. That word is bush. All right. Let's look at this week's vocabulary words. Remember, when you're doing your vocabulary entry in your Seesaw activity, you're going to place the word here, the definition here, a quick sketch, and a sentence that uses the word. So this first word is the word tundra. Say that word tundra. Awesome. So a tundra is a cold, treeless region where the ground is always frozen. Here's a picture of a tundra. So what makes a tundra is that it's cold and that there are no trees and that the ground is always frozen. Sometimes we joke about how Minnesota feels like a tundra, but we can't say that it's actually a tundra because we do have trees and the ground is not always frozen. So when you go to do your vocabulary entry, you'll use the word tundra here. You'll write that definition down. You'll draw a quick sketch of a tundra, and then you're going to write a sentence, but it must say the word tundra in that sentence. Don't forget that part. The next vocabulary word is the word permafrost. Go ahead and say that word permafrost. Awesome. You can see that permafrost has the word frost in it, which we know is frozen moisture on the ground. And it has the start of the word permanent here. So it's like permanent frost. What permafrost is a layer of soil that stays frozen all year long. So it's soil in the ground that is frozen all year long. It never thaws. Here's a picture of permafrost. And our last word, oh, this is such a good word. Try using this one at home this week. Inhospitable. Say that word, inhospitable. Great. So this word comes from the word hospitality. Okay. Hospitality means very welcoming. If you are showing hospitality or if you are very hospitable, it means you're very welcoming. So you could say that I like to show hospitality towards my guests. We have the prefix in here, and remember the prefix in means not or the opposite of. So it means that this is not welcoming. So our definition is harsh, unwelcoming, or challenging to live in. We would say that the desert is inhospitable or the tundra is inhospitable. So your job is to make sure that you go into activity 4 and do your English vocabulary word entries for the week. And then you're also in activity 5 going to do free write. And you get to choose what you write about. But remember that if you need an idea, you can use the one I gave you. And the one I gave you in the activity is to write about a place or to write about a memory you have. You could also, I'm going to give fourth graders just this idea as well. You could also write about a place on Earth where it would be challenging to live. And remember, if neither of those ideas sound good to you, you can totally pick whatever you want to write about. Just make sure that we're using complete sentences. All right, so now the next thing I would like to do is I would like to start reading our story for the week. And that story is Polar Regions of the North, and it's written by Elizabeth Austin. I'm going to read the first 2 chapters today, and then the rest of our time tomorrow will be spent reading the rest of the story. So Polar Regions of the Earth. Our table of contents shows us that we have an introduction on page 4 and the chapter Why Is It So Cold on chapter 6. We'll read those today. And then tomorrow we'll read about life in the Arctic and life in the Antarctic, and we'll read our conclusion at the end of the book. This book also has a glossary in it so that we can look up words that we don't know. And it also has an index. Let's take a look at that index really quickly. Let's flip all the way through the end. And I just went past it. The index is here at the bottom, excuse me. And the index shows us if you wanted to look up a certain topic, it tells you what pages you would find that topic on. So if I wanted to read about penguins because I love penguins, I could look on page 3, 5, 13, or 14. And there would be some kind of information about penguins on those pages. So that's an index. Let's go ahead and start reading our first chapter. Introduction. There are places on Earth where the ice never melts. Howling wind blasts needles of snow across the land. It seems as though no plant or animal life could survive there. These are the polar regions, the areas around the North and South poles. There's a picture up here and it says polar regions include the highest, driest, coldest, and windiest lands on Earth. So that already has me wondering. I'm wondering, why is it so cold in the polar region? I am going to pull up this. And something that good readers do is they are always asking themselves questions. And so while I'm reading the rest of my chapters today, I'm going to be looking for the answer to this question that I just had. Why is it so cold in the polar regions? I'm going to see if I can answer that question. Sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't. But good readers always are having questions pop up in their mind and are always thinking more about what they're reading. So let's see if I can find the answer to why is it so cold in the polar regions while I keep reading. The conditions in the polar regions may be harsh, but life does exist there. The land around the North Pole, called the Arctic, supports grasses, mosses, insects, birds, and mammals. The sea around Antarctica, the land around the South Pole, is full of fish, shellfish, penguins, and sea mammals. In this book, you will read about the inhospitable conditions of the polar regions and how some of these animals withstand them. So I know that the polar regions are inhospitable, which we just said means very unwelcoming or harsh or challenging to live in. And I believe that, knowing how cold, now that we've been reading about how cold the polar regions are, I believe that it's an inhospitable place. Do you know? Have you ever seen a drawing of a polar bear and a penguin together? In real life, this could never happen. Penguins only live in the southern half of the world. Polar bears only live in the northern half. Although some penguins live in warm areas, many prefer cold. Chapter 2. Why is it so cold? My reader brain is thinking, maybe I'm going to find out that answer as to why it's so cold in the polar regions. You probably know that as you travel away from the equator, the imaginary line around the middle of the Earth, it gets colder. It is coldest at the North and South poles. But why is it so much colder at the poles than at the equator? All of the warmth on Earth comes from rays of energy from the sun. As you can see in the drawing below, the rays hitting the equator are strong and direct. The Earth absorbs a lot of heat from these direct rays, but near the ends of the Earth, the rays hit at an angle. The rays are spread out over a wide area, so the Earth absorbs less heat. Here's that picture it was talking about, and I can see that the sun hits the equator directly. Its rays hit the equator directly, so it's able to absorb more of that heat. But here at the bottom, I see that the sunlight is hitting at an angle, and a lot of that heat is being reflected off of the Earth. It says next to it, sunlight hits the Earth more directly at the equator and less directly at the poles. Well, that answers my question about why is it so much colder in the polar regions. The book just told us the sun hits these regions less directly. Awesome. Not always will that happen where I get to answer the question, but today it did while I'm reading this book. Let's read one more page to finish off the chapter. The Earth is also tilted on its axis, or the imaginary line around which it spins. For half of the year, the polar regions are tilted away from the sun. During the winter, the sun does not shine on the polar regions at all, and without sunlight, there is no heat. That also helps explain why it's so cold in the polar regions during certain times of the year. The white snow and ice that cover the polar regions make them even colder. This white surface reflects the sun rays without absorbing heat. There's another answer as to why it's so much colder in the polar regions. So here I have a picture of the Earth in July and a picture of the Earth in January. And you can see that in July, the north part of the Earth is facing the sun more. So that means that it's going to be much colder on this other side here. And you can see in January, the south side of the Earth is closer to the sun, facing the sun, whereas the north side, that's having winter because it's facing the other way. All right, tomorrow we are going to start reading Life in the Arctic. I will see you then.